If you see the dollar bill on the wall, that is the first dollar that I ever made from selling, knowing the terror of the Lord. I wanted a record of it because the man who bought it off of me was very sincere and loved the book very much. And so I keep that as a memento that he personally paid for it. He came from a very large family. He had a lot of children, and his wife now is passed away. But those children were filled with love for the Lord. His He had one son while his wife was still alive. Well, actually, he had two that wound up going to the Lord. But anyway, the first son, they lived across the yard from me, and their son was out there, and he was stoned. His eyes were all dilated, and he was stoned. He had a young girl with him, and she was pregnant. And I stopped, and I looked at him, and he felt it. And he came up to me, and I said, "Young man, how old are you?" And he said, 35. I said, "Well, do you still want to be doing this at the age of 55? And you should have seen his face. He says, "No, ma'am." I said, "Do you mind if I lay hands on you and pray for you?" And in the meantime, this silly little girl was trying to interrupt, and he kept motioning her to please not bother us. He wanted what the Lord in me had for him. And so, not knowing who he was, not knowing anything, I put my hand upon him, and the power of God surged so tremendously from head to toe. It was the same power that I felt when God delivered my husband of alcoholism. It was the same power that I felt when God touched me and healed me completely of cancer, when I was terminally ill and told I couldn't live even 2 months. I mean, 2 weeks. But it just surged and shocked me. But I knew when I walked away, he was delivered. And I walked around the house to see his parents. And when I went through the door, they said, "We want you to talk to our son." And I said, "I already did. I think I met him in the backyard." That was one son, and he changed his whole life. He still to this day is sober. Which has been probably 10, 15 years. I don't know. Anyway, they had another son who was in his 30s. He was like 32 years old. And he drove a 18-wheeler truck. And that son, they labored and prayed and wanted that son to give his life to the Lord. For they had a large family, and all of them belonged to the Lord except for this one son. Now, I never met the son. I only saw a picture of him. I knew nothing about him. I didn't even know he was driving truck. I only know that one day the Lord came to me, and I knew there was a terrible, terrible accident. And the Lord told me that when that tractor trailer hit, it immediately caught on fire. He was instantly gone. And the Lord told me that I must go to that couple and give them this message. And I did. And here is what Jesus said. He said, all of your life, your son's life, you wanted him to come to me. And he finally did. And when he did, he fell in love with me. And if he would have lived 5 minutes more, he would have lost his salvation. So the Lord described it as I took his heart to my heart for all eternity. Because at that moment, that love was so precious to God that he took him. Now, these two, the Spirit of God fell on him, and the Spirit of God fell on the whole family. And they said when they went to the casket, they thought something was wrong with them because they could not do anything else but rejoice, for he made heaven. And it was something they wanted for how many years? I had another young lady who had a set of twins, and they were in their 20s. And before I go into this story, it's important to tell you how and why God used me for this. I was in an accident, a car accident, where I was going about 45 miles an hour, and a young lady got into my lane, and she was going about 45. You know, and I know that is a powerful impact head-on collision. When it hit, there was a witness in the front, there was a witness in the back, and a witness to one side, and a witness to the other side. And they all said the same thing. They said everything went into slow motion. Now, me, I was felt like I was suspended in time. That right there in that accident, I felt the suspension of time. And I waited. I waited on God to say whatever he was going to say to me. And he said, if you had anything to make right with me, you had plenty of time to do it. Because I take seconds just before people die. And it's like an eternity, for time is in my hands. And I allowed this so that you would know this when you minister. Well, after a couple of seconds, I immediately jumped out of the car, went around to the other car to make sure everybody in there was all right. And the woman that had hit head on to me, she had an insurance company of her own, and her name was exactly the same as my daughter's. Exactly. And I went to check out my passenger, and suddenly the paramedics came, and they said, lady, get back into that car. Now, I don't know why they did this, but they know. And they sat me back in the car, put the seatbelt on me, and then cut me out of the seatbelt, laid me on a board, and put one of those things on my neck. And I was very angry. I said, get me out of this. They put me in the ambulance and they rushed me to the hospital. And I said, look, I've been healed of cancer. There's nothing wrong with my body. God did not bring me this far for this to happen to me. And they said, lady, if you continue to move tomorrow, you will not be able to move. You do not understand the trauma that has happened to your body. And I said, well, I'm going to church tonight, no matter what you say. And I did. When I went to church, I had cuts across my chest from the steering wheel. And I went down to the office to show the preacher's wife and some ladies that were there. I opened up my blouse, and you could see the cuts. And I had a very large hematoma about this big. I mean, it was big. And it stuck out about that far. You could see it through my blouse. So when I got rushed to the hospital, they all saw that. Okay. And I went up for the service. And during the service, I was instantly healed. Every mark disappeared, and the hematoma disappeared. And I went downstairs, and I opened up my blouse, and I showed them, and they were shocked. For God just suddenly healed me. No one touched me. No one, nothing. No one even prayed for me. But I was instantly healed as soon as I came in contact with the Holy Spirit. The next day, the nurses that had seen me called and wanted to know what church I go to, which that church is gone now. I couldn't even tell you. They wanted to know everything about me because they saw the miracle in my body where it disappeared by the time I went to the doctor, which was the next day. So anyway, that healing was so great that many people heard about it. Many medical people always heard about me up north. And I didn't run around telling everybody, well, you must this, you must that. You know what? People have read that Bible and people know what they must do. And when they see those miracles, they run to God because they know they need that. But I wasn't in a position to preach or teach at that time. So, but I didn't have to tell anybody. Every last one of them knew this woman here. I was much younger then. And so this is what God used to show me and prove to me that God makes seconds turn into an eternity, and how not to receive and believe that people who could not take it anymore on this earth, for God only knows the pressures of life that you go through. I don't know if you've ever been suicidal. I was very suicidal before I met the Lord. I thought about killing myself morning, noon, and night. It consumes you. Once you entertain the thought, it consumes you. It takes over your whole life, and that's all you want to do. That's all you think about. I can remember running up the top of the stairs and on the roof and throwing my legs over the edge of the building, looking down with one thought to this brain, and that was, Marion, you better go head first, because if you don't, you're going to wind up a cripple. And so I leaned back and threw myself forward, and unbeknownst to me, my husband was behind me and grabbed me with one hand, which is impossible, and threw me about 6 feet, which is impossible, and saved me from that. He saved me from killing myself at other times. But this one particular time, I had a sister-in-law who had twins, and one of them was on drugs. And he would come to me. The family at that time was against me witnessing to anybody. Oh, they went to church, but they didn't want the God I served. And it wasn't because I told them. I lived it before them and they knew it. So anyway, they told me. The Lord told me to call up my sister-in-law and tell her this. I had no idea what was going on. I only know that God said, tell her son made heaven. So when I found out what went on, the Lord revealed to me what the young man did, because he used to come up to me and say, Aunt Marion, people don't understand why I go to church 3 times a week. I need it. He was on drugs, and he needs people who have been on drugs, who have been on alcohol, they need to be this close to God in order to keep what they have for a long period of time. They need that closeness. So one day, he needed to go to church, and it was on a Wednesday, and he asked his wife or the woman he lived with, I don't know which, to go to church with him. And she was angry with him, and she said, no, go yourself. So he looked for somebody to go to church with him, and he went to the neighbor looking for help. And the neighbor, unfortunately, had a very false doctrine and was no help to him. So he came back and he hung himself. And when he hung himself, the policeman cut him down, and he was still alive. And the policeman said, I never, ever saw a broken neck like this one, where the soul, the person lived so long. And she's pounding on his chest, cursing him. But God says, those few seconds, he repented of killing himself. Now, this isn't a license to sin that you can go kill yourself and it's all going to be all right, because it isn't. If you were to do that, I'm sure you, God wouldn't be there. But what this truth is, those of you parents that have had children that have died from suicide, God knows what caused their minds and hearts to explode with this. God knew what was wrong with me. So much pain in my life caused me to not want to live. So many traumatic things happening to me caused me to not want to live any longer. I couldn't face one day. I wrote all about it in my book. But with this young man, when I called up his mother and I told his mother what God said to me, the Spirit of God came down on her and came down on the whole family to prove it. And they rejoiced that he did not go to hell, that he did. He did get saved. He was saved. He was God's. The devil, the only thing he can do is lie. That's all he can do. I dealt with a young lady who was very suicidal and very ignorant. And I got a call and asked to come and see her. Her parents were crying. And I told them, I said, she doesn't need this. She doesn't need your tears. She needs the truth. So I'm asking you not to do it. And my husband was there. He was crying too, because her condition was that awful. So as I stood in her presence, she laughed and says, the doctors don't know what to do to me. They don't know what kind of medication to give to me. My parents don't know what to do for me. But nobody knows how to handle me. And I looked at her and I said, you are playing games with your mind. You push your mind so far that at the end of that, then it explodes like a big fit. And when that happens, once you come out of it, because you have your sane times also, once you come out of it, the first thing you think is, oh, I didn't kill anybody. She looked at me and said, you got that right. I said, the second thought that comes to you is, oh, I didn't kill myself. I said, do you know that you're not going to have to worry one bit about doctors not knowing what to do with you, parents not knowing what to do with you? Because when the men in white coats come for you and put you in a straitjacket, you are going to go into a mental institution and you're not going to have any other choice but to take the medicine that they prescribe. Because this is where you're heading when you take your fits and you push everything, because you cannot have your way. You cannot control. So you keep on taking your fits, and you love mother and dad to cry. You love the attention that you get. But I guarantee you, you're going to get the kind of attention you do not want. And she looked at me and began to cry. And she says, Aunt Marion, why am I this way? And these were the words of God to her, because you turned your back on what you know is the truth, and you began to live the way you wanted to, the lie. And they'll always be like this until you repent. Well, I'm only giving you these testimonies. I am sure there are millions of pastors that go through different things. But these people, the important thing is to tell you, there are people out there that are just like that young lady. There are people out there that are just like that young man, the one that committed suicide, the one that blew up in a 18-wheeler, the one that was on cocaine, just like them. There are millions of people who don't know where hope is. and don't know how to find it, who are just like I was. And one of my greatest prayers were this. I was so suicidal, and I was so tormented and miserable. Uh, I could not bear the thought of living one more day because of the things I felt and the things I saw. And I'm not going to go into great detail about what I did. You can just find it in my book. But the thing is I said, Lord, every person in my life never told me that they knew Jesus Christ and that he could help me. They never mentioned his name to me because I didn't know. I was 31 years old and I didn't know. They never prayed for me. They never told me, don't you know you could pray? Don't you know you could give your life to Christ? They were all church goers. They went to church. Some taught Sunday school. Every last one of them, which is a lot of people in my life. And they never, ever tried to tell me about Jesus Christ. So what I did when I got saved, I cried when I saw they all suddenly claimed to be saved. They all suddenly, when I found Jesus, they all suddenly said, well, I had him all along. Well, I know everything you're talking about. Well, I know that. I know. When that happened to me, I said, Lord, for the rest of my life on this earth, I am not going to let a single person pass through my life that I do not try to tell about Jesus Christ and his love for them. I'm not going to let a person leave my presence that I do not hold their hand and pray for them. For there are many, many people out there who need this, who need prayer, who need to know there is someone who loves them. It is not true that once saved, you are always saved. That's not true. For Hebrews was written for a reason. Hebrews tells you about if you do not love the truth, he will send you strong delusion that you may believe a lie and be damned because you do not love the truth. If I found myself in a place that I don't love the truth, believe you me, I did everything and cried out to God, Lord, help me to love the truth. Lord, forgive me for being that way and change me, oh God. I probably prayed thousands of prayers like that until I completely overcome me, Marion Lynch. I overcame her. In the name of Jesus, I'm going to tell you how God found me, where he found me, and what he said and what he did. And you may not believe it, but in this next coming episode, this is what we are going to talk about.